Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Derek Brown and by Andrew Erickson. And fellas, we are doing the inverse of a show we did a few weeks ago. We got together and we had Erickson give us his top targets, his favorite picks in every round of a 16-round draft. And DBro just had to sit there and listen and react. And now we get to flip the roles. DBro will be giving us his top targets in every round, going through rounds 1 through 16. And Erickson will be reacting along with myself to what DBro has to say. Now, we were just giving DBro a little bit of a hard time because some of these rounds, he might throw out a couple of names he was struggling to decide between two, so he can dive into that himself when we get to those rounds. But like I said, this is basically exactly what it sounds like. We're going to go through the top 16 rounds, and DBro will give us his favorite targets. So that's still going to be the whole show today. All of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. I also have a note. If you want a chance to win a signed Joe Burrow helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you need to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X/Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros on each of those platforms. The more actions you complete, the more entries you receive. We will be announcing a winner right here on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Speaking of Joe Burrow, there might be a tie-in in round 1. DBro, who is the player that you are targeting most of all in round 1 of drafts?
It's got to be Ja'Marr Chase, my wide receiver 1 in ranks, and this all comes down to we see year after year the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game. That guy changes every single year. I think Andrew Erickson's going to stand with me on this one. I think that's going to be Ja'Marr Chase, man. You look at weeks 5 through 10 last year with Burrow actually healthy, 24.6 fantasy points per game. That would have made him the wide receiver 1 overall. But sadly, we didn't get a full season out of Burrow being healthy. We know how good Chase is. And even if you look at different metrics, he averaged 107 receiving yards per game in that stretch with Burrow healthy. That would have been second to only Tyreek Hill. So if we're looking at a changing of the guard pretty much yearly of being the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy, I'm pushing my chips in, and it's going to be Chase this year.
Erickson, you have also not gone on a limb, but you've also kind of planted your flag on Chase as your number 1 player as well.
Yeah, I think that he's definitely my number 1 wide receiver. When it comes to him versus some of the top running backs that I like, whether it's Bijan or Breece, I am a little more open to going with the running back position depending on the draft setup. Is it half PPR? Is it full PPR? And what it looks like when I pick again. So what you're going to find is different from best ball, where I think that he's always been my 101 in best ball, but receivers, it's a little bit different, the landscape. So running backs go earlier in home drafts, as you guys will start to find out when you're drafting in these ESPN, Yahoo, sleeper leagues. So running back becomes a little bit more important, whether it's a Breece, Chris McCaffrey, or whoever you want as the RB1. So that's something I just want to layer in the context here, where Chase is definitely my wide receiver 1, but depending on what draft platform I'm in, I could go in a different direction with, again, my number 1 running back, who is Breece Hall.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you, Erickson. That's why, when we were building this, I also wanted to mention Bijan Robinson in this because, again, if you're not going with your wide receiver 1 overall and depending on where you're drafting in the first round, Bijan Robinson would be the other name I'd toss in here. I think he can go full Todd Gurley this year. He was the RB12 in expected fantasy points per game. We think that we're going to see a better Falcons offense this year, good offensive line. So if I'm not going with Chase, the other name that I'll give to people in that first round, if you do want to go with the running back approach and depending on where you are drafting, it would be Bijan Robinson for me.
Yeah, we don't need to take time on this episode to litigate between Bijan versus Breece. That's something we've talked about on other shows. It's something that I think we'll continue to talk about for the next few weeks. It's a very common kind of debate between fantasy analysts. But one of those guys, I feel like personally, those guys, Breece and Bijan, are the two that I would feel the most FOMO if I didn't get. They kind of feel like I'm falling into the pattern of I'm just going to be really happy if I can get one of them and then figure out what to do beyond them. Just kind of, and that's kind of setting aside Christian McCaffrey, obviously, with the latest kind of injury update as well. He's going to be, if he's healthy, the consensus number 1 pick in a lot of drafts anyway. But yeah, those two kind of RB2 and RB3 in consensus are just so appealing. I could see either of them being the consensus number one pick a year from now. So I really like both of those if I'm going away from the wide receiver position. So I'm with you guys there, although I don't know which side I'm on Bijan or Brees.
Team
It basically
Brees.
changes every
Brees,
day.
baby.
It
King Bijan,
changes
crown him.
literally depends on the day I wake up and how. Tomorrow I might feel one way, today a different way.
Well, you have your own
I can't
rankings,
decide.
right, Worms? So you're going to have to
I do. I
state your claim.
currently have.
Mm-hmm.
I now have rankings for the first time this year, just for draft rankings, and I do have Bijan ahead currently, but that is one where I could see it changing by the time we get to.
It's okay. No, it doesn't need to change, Worm. You got the right answer. It's okay.
I mean,
Stick with that.
it's genuinely a toss up, right? And
We
I think that's
said
important.
we weren't
you
going to
know.
have this debate, and now we're having this debate.
He
Well,
brought
no,
it up. I'm just
no,
saying.
I
You
did
asked him about his ranks, so we had to talk about it.
Well, yeah, because you bring it through. I actually think that is a good point on the ranks just quickly, because a lot of times people will, kind of look at our rankings on the site and say, okay, that's who they prefer, and just kind of move on rather than, sometimes people go on Discord and say, hey, can you explain why you like this guy or another? So I do think it's important to say, like, sometimes it really just is a toss-up and you had to pick somebody. They can't literally be a tie in the rankings, but I do love them both.
All I heard was Bijan, that Worm likes Bijan more than Brees. That's all I heard.
I do currently have Bijan ahead, just barely. I think I said this to Fitz. It's not 51-49. It's 50.5 and 49.5. Like, that's how close I see it. All right, let's go to round 2, DBro.
This is easy for me. It's Drake London all day, every day, twice on Sundays. I mean, I believer in the talent. Again, the upgrade in quarterback play is going to be massive this offense. And yes, overall, I'm just massively buying into this Falcons offense, man. Like, looking at Drake London, we've seen the talent. Now we get the quarterback play. For everybody out there that thinks, okay, maybe the quarterback play wasn't totally terrible last year. Falcons quarterbacks, 4th lowest adjusted completion rate last year, 3rd lowest catchable target rate. And yes, we have seen in previous seasons, his rookie season, which also we do need to go back and respect this, we have seen high-end target earning ability with Drake London. I mean, in that rookie season, 4th in target share, 15th in yards per route run, and 7th in first downs per route run. So we've seen the efficiency. Now we get to see the full untethered breakout for Drake London in 2024. It's going to happen, man. Like, if he were to finish as a top 5, top 3 wide receiver, I legit would not be shocked at all, because it's just the high-end target earners in that offense. It's him and it's Kyle Pitts. That's it.
This is something that DBro has been in on all offseason, if you listen to the show, throughout the summer. Erickson, you're not quite as high on London.
No, I'm not. And this is because I'm being a little more risk averse. I get the upside case for Drake London. It's pretty obvious. But there's a lot of upside cases in the wide receiver range that Drake London goes. But his just happens to be louder. It's the more sexy pick because of Kirk Cousins. Oh, this Atlanta Falcons offense. It's been a fantasy wasteland the last 2 years, and now we have a new quarterback, so everyone's excited, and I get that. But he's also going at the beginning of that tier at the end of round 1 that kind of trickles into round 3, where there's a lot of upside cases for wide receivers that I really like. But so when I'm looking at comparing him against some of these other receivers, well, it's all new situation. It's all projection with Drake London. Drake London has not scored fantasy points. 2 years in the NFL, he has not done it. And that's concerning for me. It's a new quarterback. What's the relationship going to be like? Is he automatically going to walk in and command a 28% target share like he did the last 2 years when the target competition wasn't nearly as good? He was competing for targets with an injured Kyle Pitts. And you said Darnell Mooney doesn't command targets? He had a year with the Bears where he had over 1,000 yards and had over a 25% target share. So I'll push back on that. I don't think Mooney's horrible, and neither do the Falcons, because they signed him in free agency. They went out and got him to add him to this offense. Now, it's definitely possible where Darnell Mooney is just eating up routes as the X receiver, and it's Drake London and Kyle Pitts eating. I totally understand that could happen, but the way I view the situation is you're baking in all the projecting has to hit, and historically speaking, this is what I wrote about in my wide receivers to avoid article. The receivers that bust at the highest rate are the guys that are projected to be the biggest breakouts, and they are the most expensive breakouts. And those are the guys that hurt your lineups the most. So I think there are better upside risk scenarios that you can get later in drafts. And for me, why did I pick round 2 Jaylen Waddle? Because I think he has similar upside as a top 5 wide receiver in an explosive offense that led the NFL, or had the NFL leading passing yardage leader on its team last year. And he's already done it. He's already been a wide receiver 1 twice, where Drake London hasn't even come close to that. So for those reasons, I'm not as high on Drake London, especially when you have to pick him at the top of round 2. If he falls, look, I have him ranked 23rd overall, so I want to provide that type of perspective that if he's in there at the right range, okay, his ESPN ADP is 33rd overall. So that's a place that I would consider taking him, especially if all those other receivers are taken ahead of him. But for me, I'm just not going to be buying into the breakout projection at his current cost because I haven't really seen enough of it for me personally to take the risk.
What do you think about that, DBro? Because I kind of agree with Erickson on the cost being a really interesting factor here. Whereas like I like Drake London as a breakout, and I would like to not miss out on the breakout. I want him on my rosters. I also feel like mid to early round 2 is like I'm uncomfortable investing in him there, given who else is on the board and that we haven't actually seen it kind of happen yet. But at the same time, I'm very unlikely to get him if I wait and try and get him in round 3. So it's either you kind of swallow it and just say I'm gonna take the risk and kind of maybe go out on a limb, not even go out on a limb, but maybe just be a little uncomfortable with the pick, knowing what the upside is, versus like I don't think you can really play the waiting game and try and get him in round 3 in most drafts at least. So what do you think about like specifically the cost for London within round 2?
I understand like you're buying in and the cost is high and there's a lot of projection here, but I guess my pushback is we have technically already seen that breakout. Now, did it come with massive fantasy points? No, but if we could say, okay, you rewind to his rookie season, the amount of targets and air yards and everything he was producing on a per route basis, if you would have had more passing volume in that offense, we would have already seen the fantasy points would have come along for the ride. But because the quarterback play was so bad, the passing volume was neutered in that offense, we didn't get that in the rookie season. On those per route numbers, if he would have produced at that clip and the Atlanta Falcons actually had passing volume in that offense, all of the other things would have come to fruition. So for me, all I'm saying is he has the talent. He has already proven that he has the ability to be a high-end target earner. And now we get to see that ability come to fruition yet again in 2024, but the volume is going to be there, so the counting stats will be elevated for him.
Let's go to round 3, DBro.
Okay, so round 3, and again, going back to team building, this is one of the rounds where I will give a slight caveat. The guy that in many iterations I will leave this round with will be Michael Pittman Jr. And look, I understand people talking about, okay, well, what if they don't throw that much? The passing rate wasn't incredibly high for the Colts last year. Yes, they ran at a really high pace with Gardner Minshew, but their passing rate wasn't exorbitant. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this is a top 12 or 15 passing rate team, and can they reproduce that with Anthony Richardson? That wasn't the case. So I think the passing rate will be totally fine because I think this is going to be an up-pace offense. That's exactly what Steichen wants to do. It's what he's done in previous iterations with even Jalen Hurts previously. And with Michael Pittman Jr., like, you want to talk about safe picks, and have we seen him already do it? I mean, the guy was the wide receiver 14 last year, and this was while he only scored 4 receiving touchdowns. He's never had more than 6 in a season. So if we finally get the year with the volume for Michael Pittman, and now, again, we're recording this, Josh Downs is dealing with an ankle injury. So you take him out of the equation. If he is banged up for maybe the entirety of the season, because we saw that last year with a knee injury. If that happens, then again, Pittman's going to eat, man. He was the wide receiver 11 in expected fantasy points per game. So I think he's the clear alpha in this offense. And the other name, look, if you start wide receiver heavy early, like you go wide receiver, and then you're saying, okay, I need a running back at that point of the draft, Isiah Pacheco is the other name that I want people to circle for the 3rd round. And I've really come around on him. Again, no Jerick McKinnon. Think he's going to be a workhorse back. In the 3 games he played at least 70% of the snaps last year for the Kansas City Chiefs without McKinnon, he was the do-it-all everything guy. He averaged 22 touches per game, 125.6 total yards per game, and an insane 25.5 fantasy points per game. I'm not expecting him to replicate that for an entire season. But even if we nerf that some 18, 19 fantasy points per game, that could put him as a top 5 running back for this year inside of an offense we all love that actually has good receiving weapons this year. So 2 guys I want to buy in because I think there's still meat on the bone for them to perform better this season than what we've seen previously.
I like the Pittman call. I love the Pacheco call. I am very in on Pacheco. I'm not somebody who's typically like super aggressive about running backs early. I tend to like the hero RB approach. But I find myself sitting here like my favorite pick in round 1 might be a running back. My favorite pick in round 2 might be Derrick Henry. And my favorite pick in round 3 might be Pacheco. I'm not going to do all three because I'm not going to start RB. But I love those guys in those rounds. And I think Pacheco, I think you're spot on. I am above consensus on Pacheco. I've definitely got him in my top 8 or 9 running backs. Pittman I like too. And I could see Pittman's ADP going up if we get news. Again, it just kind of happened this morning with Josh Downs, like you mentioned. If there is some kind of news that it's a very serious injury, which we don't know yet, as of recording, I could see his ADP going up even more. It's not going to go into like round 1 or anything, but I could see, folks getting even more aggressive on him. Erickson, what do you think about these two guys?
So I actually wanted to ask DBro where he has them ranked positionally. Where do you have Pittman and where do you have Pacheco?
I've got Pittman. Pittman is my wide receiver 12 right now. So baking in some of the upside, and I have Pacheco as my RB 11. He is the very last player right behind Devon Achane in tier 2 for me. Yeah. Where do you have him?
I just wanted to bring that up because it's always fun because I hear what you're saying and then I'm like, all right, what are my rankings? So it's kind of opposite how I thought it was going to be. I thought you were going to be higher on Pacheco than I am, but I have him as RB9, and I thought I was going to be higher on Pittman than you, but I have him as wide receiver 13. So it's just interesting how that kind of dynamic happens when we're talking about players. Be like, oh, we disagree. It's like, oh, wait, we have them ranked exactly the same, so we don't actually disagree. But the point I wanted to bring up again about Pittman, who I'm probably more vocally targeting specifically in round 3. I think he was actually the player I mentioned in my video of the top 3 or my top round picks in round 3. So Pittman I have ranked above Drake London. And that goes to that's baking in the guy's going to catch 100 balls. That guy's going to go over 1,000 yards. Like, that's locked and loaded. It's the touchdowns that have been lacking. So, again, that's kind of how I'm viewing the board here. And he goes around after Drake London. So, again, do I think London's sky-high ceiling, maybe it's a little bit higher than Pittman's? Yeah, I could buy that. But the security you're getting with Pittman, he's already done it at multiple years with different quarterbacks. And now he potentially has another upgrade. I trust in this offense. We've seen it work with Shane Steichen. And, yeah, like I said, he goes in round 3. So, if you don't take Drake London in round 2, you are looking for a running back instead. Well, then Michael Pittman's waiting for you there in round 3. Hopefully he's still there. We'll see what happens after this Josh Downs injury, how that affects his rank in ADP. But yeah, I'm lockstep with you for Pittman.
If Pittman, let's just play this out, boys. If Pittman spikes 8 to 10 touchdowns this year, he's wide receiver what? Probably 5, 7? Like, he's inside the top 8 probably, right?
Yeah, I think he's firmly in there. I think he's a player that we could see go from good, solid to great. And that's something that does happen. Players are allowed to get better. It does happen. And especially a player that's still relatively young. He's not super old. He hasn't and he has been vocal about, I haven't scored enough touchdowns. Like they know it. So again, if you're taking pieces out of this offense, the passing game, we know who the alpha is, and he's gotten red zone targets. The last season, he was top 10 in red zone targets, just didn't convert at a high enough rate. So Michael Pittman, he's still the alpha, and I feel good about that.
And to the point, like, the difference between this and London is you can get him around later, and that matters, especially early. Like, that extra round of draft capital is meaningful. By the way, I know you didn't ask me, Erickson. I have Pacheco RB8, actually, so I'm even higher than
wow.
So is he behind Derrick Henry? Are you getting Derrick Henry in this universe where you have Pacheco at RB8? No, probably not.
Yeah, I was just looking at it here. Sorry, I'm still new to navigating this with having rankings. Yes, I do. So I have them. I'm lower on a couple of guys like ETN and Kyron. So I've got them both very.
Wait. You didn't answer the question. Is Pacheco above Henry? You sidestepped it very.
Pacheco is behind Henry.
Okay.
That's all I want to know.
Okay, just asking. Right, just asking.
He's behind. They are both in my top 8.
Is Linderbaum coming back anytime soon? Do we know that? The Ravens' offensive line's looking a little shaky.
The talk has been that it's just they're just being extra cautious with him, and it's not like a severe issue. We'll see. Also, they tend to figure it out on the O-line. I'm not worried about it. Anyways, this is not a Ravens section.
This has turned into a Ravens podcast.
Yeah. And I want to. Everybody always accuses me of he always talks about the Ravens. Like, you guys are asking me about Linderbaum.
I mean, those accusations do have a little bit of basis for him. Just keeping it real.
We instigated.
Yeah.
So.
I had somebody poking.
I had somebody, actually, as a quick aside, on Instagram, they reached out to our main account, which I sometimes will respond to people on DMs in there, and they'll just ask me, hey, what do you think about this trade or whatever? And somebody was like, hey, I'm interested in this trade. In Dynasty, I would be getting Derrick Henry, but I'm a Ravens fan, so I want to make sure I'm not being biased. And I was like, well, I think it's a good trade, genuinely. I also do happen to be a Ravens fan. And I said it kind of tongue-in-cheek, and the guy was like, do you mind asking somebody else then? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you to take a player that I don't believe in. I just genuinely love Derrick Henry.
Look, this is a safe space, okay? It's a safe space.
I was like, yeah, I was saying it as like a fun bit, but like he was like, yeah, I don't trust you. I was like, no, I'm not gonna tell you to take the Ravens just because I like the Ravens. I'm gonna be a professional.
People know the bias. They've heard the bias. They know it's real.
Yeah. All right, let's go to round 4, DBro.
Round 4 is easy for me, guys. It's always Trey McBride. I love him this year. He's my tight end 1 overall. I mean, you look at what he did last year, weeks 8 through 18. I mean, just fantasy points per game, target share, yards per route run, receiving yards per game, first downs, all of these categories. If you played those out and paced those out, and this is a large enough sample size to say, okay, this holds some water, Trey McBride would have finished in all 5 of those categories top 3 for the season amongst all tight ends. I mean, we're literally talking about he would have been first in fantasy points per game. So now you're telling me this year, and this is with Kyler Murray, and I wrote this up, so go check my top 150, my player notes on Kyler Murray. He was objectively bad as a passer last year. Like outside the top 25, the top 30, and multiple accuracy metrics. If Kyler Murray bounces back and we get to see him, again, flourish as a passer in 2024, all of these things for Trey McBride, I'm not going to tell you they're going to go even higher because, again, he was top 3 in these 5 categories that all really the meat and potatoes of what you should be looking at when you're targeting players in drafts. If Kyler Murray plays quarterback better as far as throwing the football this year, ceiling's even higher for Trey McBride, man. Like, that's why, like, I'm not going to push back too hard against anybody that has anybody else because, Erickson, I know you have Andrews as your tight end 1 overall, but still, the case for Trey McBride is absolutely easy. I just keep scooping him up in 4th round.
I love McBride. I'm right there with you, DBro. You could maybe even get him in round 5. I mean, like, depending. He's kind of back end of round 4 in ADP. If you can get him around 5, like, to me, that's just like
you're pressing the draft button so hard you might break your phone.
The quickest pick you could make for me personally. I love that. Erickson, obviously, as DBro alluded, McBride like isn't your tight end 1. You have Andrews there, but what do you think about? I mean, you can talk about McBride specifically or just in general taking one of these elite tight ends in this range of the draft.
Well, with McBride specifically, so he's my tight end 3, but of the top 5 guys, Andrews, Laporta, McBride, Kincaid, Kelsey, he's probably the one I find myself drafting second most behind Mark Andrews because Sam Laporta always goes first, so I never draft him because I don't want to draft the first tight end. Kincaid, now we have some weird concerns with the Knox splits. Okay, he goes a little bit later, but that is real. Travis Kelce's older, so for me, it's McBride that really stands out. Okay, entering year 3, had a year 2 breakout, and this is something I wanted to talk about so this came from Charles Robinson from Yahoo. He was at Arizona Cardinals training camp a couple days ago, and he basically talked about how Trey McBride's red zone opportunities are going to increase. And that's really was kind of the missing component to his stat line last year. Ton of yards, ton of targets, ton of catches, not enough touchdowns. So it's kind of playing what happened with Laporta last year. Laporta scored so many touchdowns, but you look at the yardage, it wasn't that different from McBride. The only difference was the touchdowns. So this is, I think, fantasy football 101, but most years you want to fade the guys that scored way too many touchdowns one year, and you take the guys that didn't score enough touchdowns because touchdowns tend to be very fluky year to year. So if you believe in the yardage, the targets, the opportunity, and the talent, the touchdowns will come. And at least the early indications from training camp are that McBride is going to be a red zone monster. And, I mean, there's nothing about his game that would suggest otherwise. So I think that this is the year to do elite tight end because these guys are all in a very draftable range, round 4 or 5. So if I'm in a room where, again, if I'm with Worm, he takes Mark Andrews because he's a Ravens homer, then okay, I'll take McBride. Like, I'm not going to feel bad about that. So, yeah, he's definitely right behind Andrews for me, and maybe I should move him up to tight end too at this point.
I have McBride ranked ahead of Andrews, for the record. No, but that kind of overall point you made at the end there, Erickson, that was going to be what I followed up with. I totally agree that this is the year to get one of these top 5 or 6 guys. Like, your mileage may vary on who that guy is. For some, we as a FantasyPros staff have like 3 or 4 different names as tight end 1. Like, Fitz has Laporta, DBro has McBride, Erickson has Andrews. Obviously Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. Kyle Pitts, is this finally the year? Just get one of these guys. I do not want to wait till tight end 8 or later. I want to get one of these top 6 or 7 and feel really comfortable with about that position. And like Erickson said, I mean, it's affordable. You have to spend draft capital, but it's not one of these like you have to take Travis Kelce in the end of round 1 to get him or anything like that. You can get one of these guys at a reasonable cost. So I love early tight end this year.
Yeah, big agree, Worm. And I think I don't have any other tight ends on this list, just foreshadowing here, but like I'm also willing to wait if I don't get McBride at the top end of that tier. Like Kyle Pitts and George Kittle are too affordable this year. Like they round out that top 7 where like I'm walking away with somebody in that top 7 in almost every draft this year.
Completely agree. Quick note for everybody about DraftKings. You know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only like 2 days the whole year without a game. Just 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC. There's something for every fan of every sport to bet on at DraftKings. And of course, with training camps underway, football season is basically here too. So if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, guys, we're going to do the mid-round targets here as we get into round 5. Who you got, DBro?
I'm walking away round 5 almost every time with Anthony Richardson. But I will give a caveat here because if you don't want to pay up for quarterback. But Anthony Richardson's a guy, like if I want to shoot the upside of getting the QB1 overall possibly this year at a discount, then I'm sidestepping the Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen tiers, and I'm going straight for Anthony Richardson in round 5. I mean, what we saw this guy in 2 full starts, and I get it's a very, very small sample. I understand that. And I understand the risk that you're taking. But the risk could absolutely pay off this year. And I just talked about if Michael Pittman hits his ceiling, then obviously we think Anthony Richardson's going to be really freaking good this year. But last year in the 2 full starts, we got 25.7 fantasy points per game. And just for everybody in your napkin math at home, yes, that was more than Josh Allen put up in fantasy points per game, as well as he led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. So if I'm shooting my shot on the possible dark horse QB1 overall this year, it's going to be Anthony Richardson. If you don't want to pay up for quarterback in round 5,
quick note, DBro. Sorry to interrupt. Before you move off Richardson, I just want to this was just tweeted 2 minutes ago. Josh Downs, high ankle sprain. The outlook right now is that he could miss about a month. The Colts are still sorting it out.
That's not good, man.
Before I moved off the Colts, I wanted to mention that. Yeah.
No, not good. I mean, that's not good for Downs. And again, that just strengthens Michael Pittman in round 3 and really gives a little bit of life to Alec Pierce. I'm curious, guys. Like, so if Downs misses time, who's taking the slot role? What are we projecting for that offense?
I don't even know who's the other receivers behind Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell are on the roster. So I guess maybe this is tight ends. We see more tight end usage. Maybe we see Jelani Woods take on a bigger role.
Jelani Woods?
I was going to say, Deebro's going to perk up at Jelani Woods.
That's kind of my initial reaction. Look, Pittman was going to eat anyway, so I think that he may get a bump, even though I think that he's going to be the alpha anyway. What is it? Do they still have Ashton Dulin?
Yeah, I was fixing to say, do you want the laundry list of names? So, I mean, obviously, A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce are probably going to be, in that top 3. Here's the laundry list of names after that top 3. Ashton Dulin, Anthony Gold, Juwan Winfrey, DJ Montgomery. You understand this gets ugly very quickly.
Montgomery played, I believe, last year a little bit when they had a bunch of injuries. I think the Colts should call Hunter Renfrow.
Oh, my Lord. Like, I'm today years old when I found out Laquan Treadwell is on this team. My Lord. Didn't know that.
Wow. All right, Diva, sorry I interrupted you. Who was the other guy?
No, it's all good. No, so if you're not wanting to pay up for quarterback early and you want to go the route of Anthony Richardson, the other guy I'm going to bring up here, and no, I am not prisoner of the moment. This is not just watching all of the camp hype on him, but Malik Nabers has to be the other name that you circle in round 5. And it's a confluence of talent and upside and target volume. And even if the Giants do not throw the ball any more than they did last year, and I think there's a really easy case to be made that if Daniel Jones can just be somewhat competent, the O-line can be better and not be bottom 5 this year, that the weapons can be better for them this year and they could throw the ball more than they did last year, which was 518 times. If you're doing projections, I don't know how you're walking away with Malik Nabers not earning like a 25, 26% target share in this offense. If he earns a 25% target share in this offense, that would ballpark him for 130 targets, which would have been tied for 19th amongst wide receivers. And that honestly could be his floor this year. Like, would any of us be surprised if he earns a 27, a 28% target share in this offense? I won't be. So if you're not going to shoot your shot on Anthony Richardson and that upside pick, please draft Malik Nabers in round 5.
I got to tell you, he's not getting to round 5 if you're drafting with me. I'm taking Nabers in round 4.
That's fair.
I am so completely bought into instant impact. I don't care that he, we've talked about this Erickson before about like how Marvin Harrison is great, but you can get an equally elite prospect in arguably an even better situation purely for targets, not in terms of the quarterback and the offense. And you get him a couple rounds later. Like, I just adore Nabers, Erickson, and I know that you think this is a good value too.
I think it's great value. I mean, I would take him as early as round 3. I think that the ADPs are wrong between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. They should be closer. Look, targets are targets at the end of the day. And Malik Nabers is going to get more targets than Marvin Harrison Jr. And Malik Nabers is amazing after the catch. He can create touchdown opportunities on his own. So even if the Giants' offense is significantly worse than Arizona, I don't think that matters because the Nabers can make touchdowns. He can catch a screen and go 80 yards to the house for a touchdown. That doesn't have to do anything with the Giants' offense or Daniel Jones or any of that stuff. It's just a matter of how good Nabers is. So in home leagues, you have to circle him. Just draft him around before his ADP, and you'll pay off. And you're still going to get him a great value. Again, I talked earlier about with Drake London how we're in this tier, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. is at the top of that tier. You know who's at the end of that tier is Malik Nabers, and it's because he wasn't the first receiver drafted. But that upside case is still there for Malik Nabers, just like it is for Marvin Harrison, except comes at a 2-round discount. So that's why I find myself gravitating towards Nabers.
I love that. And just for transparency, again, we're pulling back the curtain here a little bit. I have him 27th overall, so I fully agree with drafting him in round 3 or round 4. Erickson, Worm, where do y'all have him in your overall ranks?
He's 30 for me.
Okay. Boom. 3rd round. Worm?
I'm pulling it up because unlike you guys, I don't have it memorized where I put him. But yeah, I've got him early 30s. I've got him 33. And quite frankly, I kind of want to move him up from that even.
3 for 3, baby.
I adore him. I think the ADP is wrong. I think the ADP will change as we get even further into August. Not just because of some of the camp highlights, but I think people will look at the situation and realize, like Erickson said, he can turn it into a better situation than we might perceive it to be even right away.
He's going to be the offense. He's their featured port of the offense. It's like drafting a running back at wide receiver. Like, that's essentially what I'm looking at. Devin Singletary plays running back on that team, but it would be crazy. You could see Malik Nabers lead I probably shouldn't say that. He's not going to lead the Giants in touches. That's too aggressive. But in terms of total overall targets, yeah, I think that he's a lock.
I mean, he's
going to be the Kirby gift. Just sucking up volume, dude.
Yeah. To put a bow on it, I think there's maybe 8 wide receivers that if you tell me everybody's healthy the whole season, there's maybe 8 guys that I'm totally confident are going to get more targets than Malik Nabers will this year. And he's a stud. He's an elite prospect with draft capital, with pedigree, with just all the ability in the world, and he's going to get top 8 targets or something like that given the situation. His ADP is too low, and I think that'll change. All right, let's go to round 60, bro.
I wrestled. This round was extremely difficult. I kept flip-flopping back and forth between Christian Kirk and Terry McLaurin. I'm planting my flag on Terry McLaurin. I'm going with him in this round. And I just think it's such a clear case for him. And, speaking of camp reports, has anybody seen that Jayden Daniels is surpassing expectations? He's looking so good in camp. Oh, it's weird. It's like we've been saying on this show the entire offseason that Jayden Daniels is going to be really stinking good very quickly. And if that happens, Terry McLaurin is going to crush. Look at Terry McLaurin. We've said this year after year after year. If we could just get good quarterback play, that's happening this season. If you look back to last year, the horrible quarterback play of Sam Howell drug him down. He was the wide receiver 21 in expected fantasy points per game, never produced as a wide receiver 2 because Howell was so bad. But if you look at the year before that, the efficiency numbers all scream that Terry McLaurin should be, and he is in my ranks, a wide receiver 2. I want to draft him as much as I possibly can. In that previous season, 16th in yards per route run, 19th in first downs per route run. He will produce and gobble up a ton of volume in a high-pace offense as the clear number 1.
Who do you like better in this round, Erickson?
I like Chris Godwin. That's the guy I'm taking. So it's easy for me. Look, that was my guy in
I
round
like Godwin
6.
too.
And that's the thing. I don't dislike Kirk. I don't dislike McLaurin. I think they make sense in a lot of different builds. But if it's me on the clock in round 6, I want Chris Godwin in the slot. And it goes back to he's been the one that's actually been a fantasy wide receiver 1 before. Again, proven production matters. It's easier for a guy to do something again versus a player doing it for the very first time. So McLaurin, I get the upside case. Again, worst case scenario, both these guys come with really nice floors, but I like DBro's case for the upside. Well, if Jayden Daniels becomes a CJ Stroud type of impact, well, then McLaurin is definitely going to benefit from that. And we're going to see him go from a middling wide receiver 2, which he is every single year, to that top 10 wide receiver if he can score some touchdowns. So if I had to pick between these two, it would be McLaurin for me just slightly, because I think Kirk, we know what he is. He's going to lead the team in targets, slot guy, but I think that I don't know how much upside he has. I think we kind of know what he is at this point, and I don't think that he would crack the top 10 unless he scored 10 touchdowns.
I also have McLaurin a bit higher than Kirk, but they're both, in this range, and I don't really have anything
I think
to
Kirk,
add
to me, is
on your
more of
reasoning.
he's a good value here, but McLaurin could actually be a league winner. That's kind of how I would view the difference between
McLaurin's
them.
the type of guy that, that I want to, he fits the profile of the type of guy that I want to be
Like-
taking in round 6 as a league winner.
Yeah.
But that's a good point on the value.
Yeah, and that's why I sided with McLaurin versus Kirk, because I could see the upside case scenario for Kirk, obviously being a wide receiver 2, being the wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville, the clear guy. But still, I think him and Evan Ingram are going to ping pong as far as competing for targets. Terry McLaurin, if he hits, could legit where Kirk, you're saying, okay, the best case scenario is probably a 23-24% target share. McLaurin could eat. He could get a 27-28% target share in this offense. He has proven that he could earn 25 plus in previous years. So expecting that this year is not insane.
Let's go to round 7 where, DBro, you finally actually just limited yourself to 1 pick here.
Yeah, and Erickson and I are going to, stand together holding hands here. It's Jaylen Warren, baby. All day, every day. I love him. I've loved him ever since a prospect, and for a player that you cannot pull up any efficiency metric at all and not find him comfortably sitting in the top 5, much less the top 12. So I think that not only does he have league-winning upside if anything were to happen to Najee Harris during the season, but also the contingent standalone value that he provides. Because everybody kind of looks at Jaylen Warren and says, okay, he's okay, it's a split backfield, but he's not great. I'm like, if anything happened to Harris, he would be a league winner. He'd be somebody we would be ranking as a top 12 running back, probably top 5, top 7, every single week in rankings. As well as last year, in weekly finishes, he was an RB2 or better in 50% of his games. So while the end of the season totals put him as a RB3 on a point per game basis, he was producing as an RB2 in multiple spots. So not only do you get that type of RB2, RB3 standalone value, you have league-winning upside if anything were to happen to Najee.
I've basically got them back-to-back at the running back rankings.
Who do you have ranked ahead?
I do have Najee ahead. But
Coward.
No!
They're back-to-back. I don't know. And that is more of a just knowing Arthur Smith and just imagining the type of guy that isn't it just really easy to paint the picture that we all want to see Warren and he just refuses to do it because he likes Najee instead. So
no, but Najee's got the draft capital though. That's the thing. Arthur Smith is like,
exactly.
I don't want the first round pick.
Not the first round pick guy. No. We got to go with the guy that was undrafted. Has to be. Erickson,
point.
by the way, where do you have Warren at? Because I got him at RB 26. Najee is at RB 30.
I have Jaylen Warren at RB 22, and I have Najee at RB 27.
Ooh.
So
that RB 22 ranking, man,
I just think for
makes
me
things
in round
tingle.
7, he makes sense in almost any type of build I'm doing.
Yes.
Hero RB, he makes sense there. I'm doing zero RB, he makes sense there. If I don't like the receivers, I just take Jaylen Warren. I just think he's the perfect pick. Worst case scenario, he just returns on where you drafted him. If nothing happens or his role doesn't expand, he doesn't see it expanded red zone role. But he's also playing for a contract too. He's not linked into the Steelers long term. The Steelers are basically saying, hey, who wants to be the RB1 in 2025? And I think Jaylen Warren, I think he's ready to take it. So,
agreed.
Let's go to another running back that, DBro, you are very excited about this year.
I need to start buying Commanders gear because I just love this offense. I think people are massively sleeping on it, man. Brian Robinson Jr. is one of the best picks you can make in all of your drafts. I don't understand why we do not have him ranked as an industry as a top 24 running back. Everybody's so worried about Austin Eckler, and I'm not, man. Like, we've seen so many iterations of a Cliff Kingsbury offense lean on one running back in the red zone at the goal line. That is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. And people don't give him enough credit for how good he was last year. The RB14 in fantasy points per opportunity, the RB22 in fantasy points per game. So again, he's already put up an RB2 season. Nobody cares about that because they keep ranking him as an RB3. He was also incredibly efficient on a per touch basis. He was 13th in yards after contact per attempt, 5th in yards per route run. So please tell me how Austin Eckler is going to get all of this passing volume and garner all of that. Not that I'm saying that Jayden Daniels is going to be checking it down a ton, but Brian Robinson Jr. should be scooped up in every single draft. Again, as a player that fits every single roster build. It doesn't matter if he's your RB3, your RB2, you're going 0 RB. Draft him and just enjoy.
Yeah, I love this call too. I actually have him one spot right behind Jaylen Warren. I have Najee Warren, Brian Robinson back to back to back. I love the Robinson call. Obviously, you're very in on just this Commanders offense in general, DBro, and there's going to be another player that we're going to mention in a couple of rounds. Erickson, are you also in on Brian Robinson?
Yeah, I got Brian Robinson's RB21, so well ahead of Austin Eckler, and I think that it's that red zone role. It's that rushing efficiency that he should get a boost in by having a mobile quarterback under center. Look, Cliff Kingsbury's offenses in Arizona during those 4 seasons, the RB1 averaged 10 rushing touchdowns per year. We saw what Anthony Lynn did with Austin Eckler and with the Chargers. He didn't use him in the red zone until Anthony Lynn left LA or San Diego, whenever they were playing football on the West Coast.
California. Whenever they left California.
Until Anthony Lynn left, Eckler was never sniffing the red zone. And then he left, then he scored 20 touchdowns for 3 seasons in a row or whatever. So for me, it's so crystal clear that B-Rob is the guy you want in this backfield. It's what all the training camp buzz has been about B-Rob in the backfield. And if we get any receiving, I don't expect him to have a target share that's really significant at all, but the guy can catch the ball and make plays. So if we don't see Jahan Dotson step up, Luke McCaffrey is a rookie. If we don't see anyone else step up in this offense, Zach Ertz can't stay healthy, well, then you're going to see more targets to the running backs. So I think that Brian Robinson, yes, another just no-brainer pick, especially if you're looking at running back values later on in your drafts. Round 8's perfect.
We've said this a bunch, on the show. I just can't stop thinking about RG3, Alfred Morris, Jayden Daniels, and Brian Robinson. I just think it's such a fun 2.0 version of what we saw over a decade ago in Washington, and it's really easy to picture it kind of playing out similarly for the running back, particularly this year. So I love that comp. I love the pick. I will be absolutely smashing Brian Robinson in round 8 wherever I can get him. Anybody who knows me knows there's basically nothing in the world I love more than going to baseball games all summer long. In fact, I've already made plans to attend not 1, not 2, but all 3 Orioles games out here in Denver when they play the Rockies at the end of this month. And to make sure I get the best seats for those games at the best price, I turned to Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I'll be planning ahead for the O's series, of course, but one of my favorite things about Game Time is the last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I'll be headed to a concert at Red Rocks in a couple of weeks as well. You can be sure I'll be checking out Game Time's deals for that one. 2 other features I love for how much it takes the frustration out of ticket buying are Game Time's seat views, showing your view from the seat before you buy, and all-in pricing, so I know the total upfront with no hidden fees. Game Time is simple to use, but more importantly, the app gives me all the information I need to make an easy ticket purchase. So this summer, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. right, DBro, let's go to round 9.
The man, the myth, the legend, Christian Watson. Always Christian Watson. I don't know what people need to see besides health out of Christian Watson. Like, that's it, man. Like, if we get health out of Christian Watson, he's going to be the runaway clear wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers. I've talked about him on so many different episodes. The thing I really want to highlight for Christian Watson here is for the entirety that he was actually supposedly kind of healthy last year, he did not get a really good version of Jordan Love. We didn't see Jordan Love really just flip the switch and become this elite quarterback down the back half of the season until week 12. Sadly, Christian Watson only had 2 games with Love playing extremely lights out football. But in those 2 games we got, Christian Watson earned a 23.5% target share. He had 3.0 yards per route run, and he averaged 24 fantasy points per game. I understand it's only a 2-game sample. I get that. But you zoom out, when he was healthy and playing all the snaps, he led them in every single possible statistical category. You go back to his rookie season, we were all chirping and talking about how stinking good he was. If we get the health, Christian Watson, again, will lead people to fantasy championships. The only other name I'll bring up here is, again, I mentioned earlier, if you weren't drafting or you weren't in on taking a quarterback early like Anthony Richardson, the only other name I'll bring up is Jayden Daniels. But in many iterations, if I'm not drafting Jayden Daniels, I am drafting Christian Watson.
Erickson, what do you think about these 2 picks?
I think they're perfect picks in round 9. Christian Watson is boom or bust. We know that if he's healthy, he's going to be a screaming value, and you're getting him in round 9, so you can just put him on your bench and kind of see how this Packers rotation. Again, it might be ugly early on where we're trying to figure out who's being deployed where, but from a talent perspective, we've seen the most upside, I think, on a week-to-week basis from a Christian Watson. So we should be in on this Packers offense, and we should be putting guys on our bench so we can figure out during the season who's going to pop off. So Watson makes a lot of sense. And Jayden Daniels, it's a layup, man. It's a layup to draft as a late-round quarterback. I think it's so easy. I think it's one of the easiest things to do in fantasy football this year is just draft Jayden Daniels as your late-round quarterback.
Jayden Reed, winners, right? I mean, if they hit, these guys will win you their league.
Oh, I firmly believe that, man. I'm in on both these guys. And just for everybody's favorite son, Jayden Reed, dealing with the calf issue right now, not practicing today.
Let's go to round 10, DBro. Who you got here?
Hooey. Oh, man. It's going to have to be JSN for me. And I know I keep talking about all these wide receivers. There's so many good bets to make as far as breakout wide receivers this year. And again, we are very firmly, and I would say we, because I know we've talked about this on numerous shows about leaning wide receiver heavy early and stuff. But again, there is credence to if you want to, like Warren talked about, a lot of running backs that you like or people like in the early rounds of drafts. There are breakout candidates that could crush this year, and JSN has to be, at least if he's not leading the pack, he's in that conversation. He's in that top 5 guys that could absolutely just flip leagues on their heads this year. And I know people will struggle with this and say, did you see him play last year? Yes, I saw Shane Waldron use him in the most horrible manner that he could possibly do into neutering him into Seattle's Malachi Corley. That's not going to happen this year in Seattle. I have more faith that Ryan Grubbs is not going to use him like that. And when we saw from JSN, when he was used out wide, like amongst 109 qualifying wide receivers that ran at least 100 routes on the perimeter, Jaxon Smith-Njigba was 3rd in targets per route run as a perimeter wide receiver and 14th in yards per route run on the outside. Do not tell me he cannot play the outside, and don't tell me that he's just a slot guy and he's not going to do anything. I don't believe it, not for a second.
Erickson, what do you think?
I think JSN's one of the easiest second-year breakout candidates to really identify after, an underrated rookie year, I think is the best way to describe it. And overall, the training camp stuff has been pretty positive with him. Just, hey, we're going to use this guy we drafted in the first round. That's awesome. What a novel idea. So given the context of his injury, given the fact that he missed so much time, I know we talked about this JSN's upside on a show we did with Jacob Gibbs from CBS, and he was on the JSN side of things, and that's who I would have talked about if he hadn't beat me to the show sheet. So I'm locked up with JSN. DBro, would you take JSN over Jameson Williams, another young receiver who's got a lot of pump?
Easy.
I guess for me, it's the path for him to be productive in fantasy is so much more clear to me, where Jameson Williams, I get that he can become a big real-life factor for the Lions and kind of take their offense to the next step. But you're still looking at, okay, well, how many targets is this guy actually going to get? Where JSN, I think it's pretty safe to say, hey, he's going to surpass Lockett at worst. But, I mean, Metcalf's never been a true alpha. It's always been him a 1A, 1B situation. So if JSN asserts himself into that 1B, well, you're looking at a guy that's going to see well over 100, 110 targets, who's talented and is going to have better touchdown luck. So I'm excited about the Seattle offense with Ryan Grubb, and I think JSN, even if he doesn't end up being a top 10 receiver, I mean, he's definitely going to finish higher than his ADP, which looks like it's wide receiver 46.
To your point, Erickson, Tyler Lockett had 122 targets last year. If we get that for JSN in his second season, well, it's wheels up, baby.
The thing too that's interesting is, so JSN, if you just look at his stat line without considering touchdowns, it looks almost exactly the same as Jaden Reed's. It's very interesting when you look at it that way. And
except one ran super hot on touchdowns and scored 10 touchdowns, and the other one,
you fade the guy that scored all the touchdowns last year for the guy that didn't score enough touchdowns the year before. So
for me, and it's different for every player, but typically when I have like a prospect that I love, and I loved JSN coming out of college, I am willing to give them 1 year as a mulligan. If it's a couple of years, that's when I say, okay, maybe I was wrong, whatever. Year 2, if a guy struggled, I really don't care if I was that much of a believer in year 1. I'm willing to buy the dip and kind of believe in the evaluation and the talent and see what happens in year 2. And again, it could be wrong, and it's different for every player. But that's kind of my philosophy with it. The other thing I wanted to mention, DBro, because obviously you made one pick here. The other name you were considering, Jerome Ford. I just wanted to mention because I had written down a stat. I don't know if this is really meaningful or not, but I thought it was interesting. There were only 5 players that had multiple 50-yard rushes last season. It was Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, and Jerome Ford. So 4 pretty elite running back talents, and then a guy who's going a lot later than those other ones. So again,
who does not belong? That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, you could definitely look at it that way. All right, let's go to the late round targets. We'll spend a little less time on these because we're, at this point, it's kind of just plant your flag, get your guys, just take the people that you want to have on your roster, and you're going to be cutting these guys, if they don't pan out pretty quickly into the year. So we'll go rounds 11 through 16 here. DBro, who you got in round 11?
Curtis Samuel, man. He should be the number 1 wide receiver, and I'm saying wide receiver, so cut Dalton Kincaid out of that. The number 1 wide receiver drafted for the Buffalo Bills this year. I think he is going to be the guy they look to in multiple different roles, and I think he's going to play the outside. I think Shakir's going to be the slot guy. They're probably going to rotate a little bit. But Curtis Samuel, the other thing we've talked about with the Buffalo Bills offense over multiple seasons is when they get in the red zone, they do funky stuff. They do all the KC stuff. They do touch passes. They use guys on jet sweeps. They like to be creative once they get to the red zone. All that just screams Curtis Samuel usage. And for everybody out there that says, okay, well, he wasn't very good. He's not. Do you really think he could play the outside? Again, if you look at the splits of him as a slot wide receiver versus an outside guy, last year, amongst that same sample size that I just talked about with JSN for 109 wide receivers, Curtis Samuel last year was 30th in yards per route run with 2.12 on the outside. The year prior to that, 1.84. Extremely solid, if not eye-opening marks for a player that I think we're sleeping on.
I love this pick. Erickson, what do you think of Samuel here?
Took him in the last mock draft we did as one of my wide receivers for someone I was looking for.
You sniped me on him. I had him at the top of my queue, man.
I was looking for some instant production because he knows the Joe Brady offense, and we saw him be the best in fantasy when he was in Joe Brady's offense in Carolina. So he can play multiple positions. I think he can play on the outside. I think they can move him into the slot. They can use him on carries, jet sweeps. So every year Samuel always puts together a stretch of 6 weeks where, did you know that Curtis Samuel leads the Bills in targets since week whatever? That's going to happen again this year. So even if it's not he's the best receiver for the entire season, especially out the gates, he's someone that you can plug and play and be productive. So
I got a real quick question for you boys. Who finishes with more touchdowns this year, Curtis Samuel or James Cook? I'm going with Samuel.
I'm going with James Cook.
Okay. I think I would go with Cook too, but it's an interesting question. I won't dismiss Samuel out of hand, but I would go with Cook.
I think that he's too talented to not find the end zone a couple more times, so I'll go with Cook.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't say rushing touchdowns. I mean, I could have gone that route too.
Yeah. All right, round 12, DBro.
It's Rico Dowdle time, man. I'm not worried. Like, if we flip over the cards at the end of this year, is there a really, really good chance we look back on this draft season and say, why were we so worried about Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas? Why were we so worried about this fossilized player that proved that, like, he is truly on the back nine of his career? With Rico Dowdle, like, we know McCarthy loves him. It just comes down to, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, I think he can take over this backfield. And if that's the case, he's going to be a really fantastic value. And small sample size, but last year he was 16th in yards after contact per attempt. I went back and watched all of his carries last year in all 22. Talented player. The big thing for him is if the offensive line, they use more inside zone runs, get him downhill this year, I think he can take over this backfield. And he's popping in camp right now with all these like one-handed catches, and there's his receiving upside out of the backfield. So I'm not worried about Ezekiel Elliott, and I'm not drafting him.
Yeah, I think I'm too low on Rico Dowdle. I'm moving him up right now as we speak. I think the upside, and again, we're in round 12, so you're looking for upside. You're looking for guys that can really outperform their, give you value for where their ADP is. And I think Dowdle's a great case for that because the upside case is clear. If he takes over this backfield, it's going to be a good offense. There's not going to be a ton of competition. That's really lucrative for a running back in round 12. Erickson, where do you have Dowdle ranked?
Yeah, so I recently moved Dowdle up after I read a report from The Athletic that said that he was being used in high leverage situations, because that was really the thing that I was most concerned about. Rico Dowdle, of course, he's going to look more explosive than Ezekiel Elliott. If he wasn't, then that would be a major red flag if you don't look at explosive compared to Zeke. But the question is, explosiveness and rushing yards can only get you so far in fantasy. We need touchdowns. We need catches out of the backfield. And up to this point, my impression was, well, Zeke is still trusted on third downs in pass pro. He can still do that. He can still play a lot of snaps. He played a ton of snaps for the Patriots last year. That's a skill, to be able to play an entire game and not have to come off the field. So I think the Cowboys are looking for, hey, can somebody please step up and make us not have to play Zeke because we don't want to play this guy because we know he doesn't offer a ton of upside. And I think Dowdle's starting to kind of fit and live up to that mold and that expectation. So I have moved him up recently, so he's RB32 for me now. But yeah, I think that he's the perfect guy to target in this range where week one it comes out and it's a muddy committee, he's not playing. Okay, well, you cut him and then you move on. So, because he didn't win the backfield, but this is a backfield that should be won during training camp at some point, and so far it's been pretty positive regarding Dowdle, especially with him getting high leverage looks. If he's working at the goal line, that's what we need. We need Dowdle at the goal line. If it's Zeke, then I don't care how many rushing yards Dowdle's going to get. It's not going to get us there for fantasy, but so far I've been encouraged by what I've seen and heard from Cowboys camp for Dowdle.
DBro, who's next?
Well, we slammed the wide receivers early. Now we're going to get the long run of running backs that could lead you to titles, and Marshawn Lloyd is the next guy I'm going to bring up here. I've talked about my fade of Josh Jacobs all off season. Lloyd he's too freaking talented, man. I don't care. I do not care at all about A.J. Dillon. Anybody that watched A.J. Dillon play football last year, you shouldn't care about him either. Like, just straight up. Like, I'm sorry. Like, wasn't it good at all? Hasn't been good for multiple years. Really think he was brought back as just a safety blanket. Lloyd, I get he missed some time early in camp. Look, we're playing out the full entirety of the season, people. I don't know if Josh Jacobs can stay healthy. I don't know if he can break tackles, especially at the clip that he's done previously in his career. He's already dealt with 2 injuries prior in camp with a groin and a hammy issue. Marshawn Lloyd is the truth, man. He is so stinking talented. Since 2022, amongst all collegiate running backs, 242 in this sample, Lloyd was 9th in missed tackles forced, 24th in yards after contact per attempt. He's an amazing player. Just watch him play. I will keep drafting him every single time.
I was with you all draft season, DBro. You know that I love Lloyd as well. He was, my RB1 in terms of just the evaluation, not in terms of landing spot and everything. I loved Lloyd throughout the offseason. Erickson, where do you have Lloyd ranked?
I'm not drafting Marshawn Lloyd. I disagree. My point is, yes, he's a very talented runner and super efficient, but I just don't think he's ever going to carve out a massive role in this backfield. I'm just being honest, because it's a three-headed monster here. And I think we're going to pull the cards out in week one, and he's going to be third on the depth chart, and we're going to be like, why? I got to cut this guy. I got to move on. So that's, for me, the reason why, because I don't think that Jacobs and Dillon are going away anytime soon. Yes, there's obviously injury upside, but you can make that argument for any running back. But with Lloyd in particular, Well, there has to be 2 injuries because I don't think A.J. Dillon's going away. I don't think he's good either. But
you don't think he can usurp Dillon as the RB2 if you don't think Dillon's good?
Well, why didn't Lloyd usurp all the backfields he played in the college level? Like he never really took over. But that's a concern. He never.
Yeah, but a lot of that could be talked about how college coaches want to use. Like every Georgia back that comes out, we talk about that. Every other team, USC was a pass first offense with Caleb Williams. Like.
Okay, so then why did the Packers still use A.J. Dillon last year when he was playing horribly?
They had nobody else. Who are they going to use?
Like, I'm just saying, I just don't believe that he's going to be able to usurp both guys and carve out a massive role while they're healthy. That's my concern. And the other thing, too, is the ball security stuff. There's been some rumblings at camp, too, that he has not been the ball security hasn't been excellent, and that was something he dealt with at college. So again, another reason
that was in college too.
Another reason that for the coaches to not put him on the field over trusted veterans, like that's my concern. That we're just gonna be waiting a long time for this to happen. And yes, if he's playing, I agree with you. He would be a smash. But I think that this is gonna be more frustration for fantasy managers. So even though again round 13, again it's a pick that it's a sleeper pick. It's not a waste. It's not a bust. But in this range. I could take J.K. Dobbins. That's who I would take instead of Marshawn Lloyd. I think he can be the RB1 week 1 for the Chargers. So that's just the way I view it. Again, not poo-pooing Lloyd as a talent. If he gets in there, he's going to be a guy I'm going to rank highly. But the pathway, I just don't see it as clearly as you do.
No, I get it. And if I had concerns about Dillon, I'd feel like you do.
We have, over 100 rankers on our site, and Erickson, you're in like the bottom dozen-ish or so on Lloyd. So you are definitely low on him.
The hate has gone too far.
Based on the last update, I don't know if you've changed it since then. I'm showing Lloyd as RB 35 for DBro and RB 61 for Erickson. I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, I do like Lloyd the player a lot. I think 35 is a bit high, and I think 61 is a bit low, and that's obviously a pretty wide window to hit. So it's not like I'm going out a limb by saying he's gonna be in the middle there, but I like the player a lot for sure. All right, round 14, DBro.
Again, committee backfields, man. I want the running back catching passes in Denver. It's just that simple, man. And that's Jaleel McLaughlin. 9 years, the last 9 seasons of Sean Payton coordinating an NFL offense. His backfield has never finished lower than 4th in running back targets. They led the league last year. Like Jaleel McLaughlin, like on a per touch basis, he's been awesome. Everything coming out of camp says he's been awesome. Lunch pail guy, first guy in the building. Sean Payton has been gushing about him all offseason. We have questions about pass pro and can he play the passing down. Sean Payton has not come out and said anything about McLaughlin falling on his face, struggling with it, or anything like that. So I'm going to keep drafting Jaleel McLaughlin, and I've been talking about him since freaking January. Again, I want that role in the Denver Broncos offense. I think McLaughlin gets it, and if he does it, he's going to catch a crap ton of passes and be a wonderful value, especially in PPR leagues.
Erickson, are you going to once again bring up DBro not being interested in McLaughlin in your dynasty trade offer?
No, I wasn't.
Well, you can't do that considering he's been sniping me in every damn draft drafted him before me.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I would just say the overarching point with Denver in general, this offense is going to use the running back so much that we could see multiple guys being productive. So it's kind of like a rule for me now, becoming just make sure I leave a draft with a Denver running back. Because whether it's Javonte, again, all these guys are so cheap anyway that, yes, Jaleel, I think that the value point of him is the best, but where is his ups? Like, my only concern with his upside case is he's probably not going to see the red zone work. So, yes, in a full PPR, I love him in getting those value because I can flex him in any single week that I need players to get production. But the red zone touches, I think that could be Estime, could be Javonte Williams. So you see a path where those guys can be productive too. So, but again, they're all so cheap that just leave your draft with a Denver running back and take 2 guys. I don't care. I've drafted Estime. I've drafted all 3 sometimes because Sean Payton offenses feature their running backs. There's so many question marks about the receivers and the tight ends. I just know points are going to go to the running back position here because Bo Nix just loves to throw the ball to the running back position. So that's something to keep in mind as we're just kind of talking about these later rounds.
It's kind of a poor man's version of the approach to the Chargers backfield where a lot of people are doing that for them when they say just get somebody and we'll kind of see who ends up being the guy. It's kind of the same thing with the Broncos. All right, round 15, DBro.
I know I've talked about him in previous years, and I'm not just buying into too much camp hype here. But look, if we're talking about, if we knew, and I'll throw this to you guys, if we knew Justin Fields was going to be the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if we knew that, we had news about that, he's beat out Russ, where would y'all be ranking him in fantasy quarterbacks? Because I can tell you right now, I would have him as a top 12 quarterback. Wouldn't even blink an eye at it. I'd have him inside of my top 12 because QB9, QB5 in fantasy points per game, we know he's going to freaking run. But where would you guys rank him? And in that case, that's why I have to highlight him in this round.
I think maybe like QB. I don't know if I would say 12, but like 13 or 14, I think, and maybe even higher.
I mean, I would probably rank him at worst 8. QB8.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, he's
break
going to
him
run.
higher.
He's going to run. He has to be a top 12 guy considering his rushing upside if he plays all the games because we've seen him do that regardless of the passing stuff.
There's so many quarterbacks that I just really like in that range that it's more about I just don't want to like push those guys down. But yes, I mean Fields would be significantly higher, obviously.
Yeah, and with that, this is a guy that you have to be circling at the late round of your draft because if he does win that camp battle, if you draft and you do your fantasy drafts before the preseason ends and we still don't have news of that, this is the type of player you're taking the flyer on because he could be a difference maker for your team. Even if you wait till late round quarterback or you pay up, we're talking about the freaking 15th round of a draft. So if he's not the starter, cut him. Fine. Pick up another flyer. But if he is the starter, you legit just drafted in one of the final rounds of your draft a top 12 fantasy quarterback.
But DBro, that means I can't get Bo Nix.
I didn't even know.
Round 16. Let's
I don't even know how to respond to that. I don't even know how to respond to that.
DBro.
Oh, last round guy for me. It's. I mentioned 2 guys here on the sheet. I'm going to stick with Demarcus Robinson because I know what his role is. And with a team that is going to be top 5 in 3 wide receiver sets. Now, look, I love Puka Nacua, but he's also banged up right now. We're hearing good reports, like it's week to week. He's going to be fine for the regular season. But again, if we're trying to hedge some of the injury report bets and stuff like that, as well as to dive into what he did last year, Demarcus Robinson, weeks 13 through 18, he's top 36th in yards per route run, first downs per route run, fantasy points per route run. He was the wide receiver 31 in fantasy points per game. And again, if he doesn't hit, if he doesn't play up, if he's not good, and he's splitting routes with Tutu Atwell to open the season, cut him. But if not, we've seen Stafford support so many different weapons over the last few years. And now Puka's dealing with an injury. Cooper Kupp, we cannot trust him to stay healthy at this point of his career. Who else is in this offense? Like Tyler Higbee is going to be recovering from an ACL for most of the season. So what do we talk about? Colby Parkinson and who knows who else at tight end? Davis Allen. Like Demarcus Robinson is going to have a real role in this team. And he's one of the guys where if you want to pair him with a rookie upside guy, like the other guy I had on the sheet here, Jermaine Burton, and you're saying, okay, or Ricky Pearsall, whoever, pick your flavor du jour of the final rounds of rookies, Javon Baker. You pair those 2 guys together, you're legit talking about Robinson is a flex player for you or a wide receiver 3-4 for you until one of those guys breaks out and maybe is a stretch run hero for you. This is how you need to layer your rosters, especially in the late rounds of drafts.
I think that's a good point. Erickson, any of those guys that he just threw out there that you have interest in?
I mean, Demarcus Robinson, to me, I guess my only concern is what's like the ultimate ceiling play with him. I get that if he makes up for, if he's filling in for an injured Cooper Kupp or Puka, I get that and I get his role out of the gates. I think for me, I think I'd rather in these rounds probably be just looking for running backs a little bit more, just guys that I'm hoping someone gets injured, then they get that role. So that's what I'd be hoping for. And then maybe taking a shot on some of these Patriots wide receivers as an idea of like, hey, can someone really assert themselves as the alpha or maybe a rookie wide receiver with a more larger range of outcomes. But no, I mean, I'm not going to poo-poo DBro on. Dude, you took Demarcus Robinson in round 16? You're an idiot. Like, no, I mean.
DBro, you don't have a favorite kicker you wanted to take here?
Nope, never draft kickers. Nope, not unless there's a fire. Nope, never. Nope.
Not even if there is a fire. Any other kind of final thoughts, DBro, just like overall from the exercise takeaways from sitting down and actually anything you learned kind of about your approach to drafting this year from picking your favorite players in each round?
I think all of this player list just cemented for me that so many of my teams are going to be built with wide receiver heavy early, or hero running back, because I love so many of these running backs in these middle or later rounds that are either being disrespected because of their upside and their role, and people are reading the situation wrong, or they have the talent to really make some noise, especially if injuries happen. So it just leads me to the pillars are, I want to draft a rushing quarterback. There's so many of them that you can get. I'm probably more likely to play hero running back or to wait on the position and go 0 RB. And I'm getting an elite tight end like we talked about earlier. Those are the big takeaways for me for draft season.
All right, we'll get out of there on that. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around for this longer episode. Obviously, we got through even more than just 16 names, so hopefully a lot of helpful information there. For Erickson and DBro, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.